Welcome to the tutorial on how to create this adorable little bear. If you've got our DIY kit, you'll have all the tools you need to create this beautiful piece. But first, we're just going to look at some of the stitches that we're going to be using throughout this project. So the first thing we're going to be doing is our reverse chain stitch. Now, when you hear me say to do your starting loop, this is what I mean. So if we have our starting point, which here is the top of this line, we're going to come down about 1/2 centimetre, and this is where we're going to start this starting loop. So we're going to bring our needle up, leave a small tail underneath to tie off to. We're going to take our needle back down through that hole to create a loop. We're then going to bring our needle to the starting point of this line, and then we can hook this loop over our needle and pull it through, and we create our first chain. We then anchor this down, and then we're going to do what's called a reverse chain stitch. So we're going to bring our needle back up around 1/2 centimetre, and then using the back end of the needle, we're just going to bring our needle through the chain that we just created and bring it down to create a second chain. Now, normally I don't do my chain stitches this way, but when we use our stick and stitch, I find this method easier as it is a little less taxing on the fingers and it's a little bit more user friendly and definitely way more beginner friendly. So we're just going to continue like this, following our fabric markings. If you've got our stick and stitch, you'll obviously be following the stick and stitch lines for the teddy bear. And this is the stitch we're going to be using when I say this is the reverse chain stitch. Next, we're going to look at how we tie off. Now, we've got our threaded needle and we've got our starting tail. So if basically you want to tie these two together. If your starting tail is quite far from your end tail, you're going to do a whipped back stitch, and we're going to either bring it together or we're going to stop halfway through. So let's say that our starting tail is quite far. We're going to do a whipped back stitch probably about 3 or 4 times, and then we can just tie a little knot and we can snip off the end, and that is how we tie off. If our starting tail is quite close, we can continue this whip back stitch until our two tails meet, and then we can triple knot them together. So when I say we're going to whip back stitch and tie in a triple knot, this is exactly what I mean. So let's get our project underway now that we know how to do a basic reverse chain stitch. So the first thing we need to do is to take our stick and stitch, and we're going to cut around it and make sure that we get it nice and central. Now, to do this, you can use a measuring tool, a ruler, you can use a centering stencil. However, I simply like to just count the stitches either side of my stencil or my stick and stitch, and then I'm happy that it's nice and central. You can use your fabric marker just to put a marking on either side of your stick and stitch, and then when you peel it off, you know exactly where to position it so that it's nice and central. Make sure that your stick and stitch is nicely adhered to your garment, and we're going to start by putting approximately 2 meters of the brown yarn onto our needle. We're going to start here with the foot, and just like we saw at the beginning video, we're going to start with our starting chain. So we're going to bring our needle up, make sure that we leave a small tail underneath, and then we're going to take our needle back down through the hole that we just came up from, and then we're going to create this starting loop. Once we've pulled that through, we can then take our needle approximately 1/2 centimetre away from the starting loop, and we can bring our needle up. Sometimes there is a little bit of resistance, but there shouldn't be too much resistance, and just pull that one through. And then we're just going to anchor that one down, and this is going to be our starting chain. And then once we've anchored that down, we've got our starting chain. From here, we're going to be doing 1/2 centimetre gaps between each chain. So you can see here, I'm just pointing out 1/2 centimetre, and then we're going to bring our needle up from that point. And then again, using the reverse end of your needle, you're going to bring your needle through the chain that you just created. Sometimes it does get a little bit snagged like I have here. So we're going to bring it through, and then we can anchor it down to create a second chain. And we're just going to continue like this all the way around the outer side of the foot. And you should have, like, sometimes you do get a little bit of resistance with the stick and stitch, but it shouldn't be so resistant that you're pulling through thread or yanking on thread. If you find that it's doing that, take your needle out, reposition it, and try again. There should be a little bit of resistance, but not a lot. So then we're going to finish off by doing our final chain. And then we have our lovely outer side of the foot finished. Now to tie off these two ends, we've got two little tails there. We're just going to triple knot them together and snip off any excess ends. And then we're just going to repeat the same process, but this time on the left side. And now once that's finished, we're going to look at the middle section between. And again, this is the exact same process with our starting chain. And then we're just going to reverse chain all the way to the end. Once we've anchored that down, you can see now we've got two tails that are a little bit away from each other. So we're just going to take our threaded needle and we're going to do a whip back stitch underneath until those two tails meet, and then you can triple knot them together, snip off any ends, and you're good to continue. We're then going to continue this method for this section of the arm, and then leading up to here, and then the one leading up to the face. And again, once you've anchored, if your two tails are separated, you just need to do a whip back stitch until your two tails meet, and then tie together in a triple knot. So now we're just going to repeat the same process, but this time on the other side. You'll see here I've put a few fabric markings. That's just where I'm going to be doing my starting chain. So next we're going to move on to the face. Now again, it's the exact same process that we did with the lower section of the body. And I'm just going to show you what happens when we come to a junction. So here we've brought our stitch all the way to the top of the underneath the first ear. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my needle in about 1/2 centimeter, and I'm going to pop my starting chain right here. And once we've done that, we're then going to do our reverse chain stitch all the way to this junction, and then again continue with this process until we get all the way to our starting chain. Now I just want to show you here, in case you run out of any yarn, this is what we do. So we've anchored down that last stitch. We've not got that much yarn left on our needle, so we're just going to cut off that excess. We're going to thread on our new yarn, so we're going to add probably about 2 meters of fresh yarn onto our needle. And then all we're going to do is very, very simply bring our needle up again 1/2 centimeter away from the last stitch that we just did. Pull that up and then leave a tail underneath. And then you're just going to carry on reverse stitching. It's very, very simple. And then once you start that, you'll see it's a nice flawless look, and we can turn our garment over. We've got 2 tails there, which again, we're going to triple knot together, snip away any excess, and we're going to continue with our chain stitching. So now that we've come to the end, I'm just going to bring my needle up and do one last little reverse stitch here so that it looks nice and flush together. And then when I flip my garment over, you'll see we've got our starting tail and our ending tail, which we're then just going to triple knot together. So next we're going to be looking at the pads of the bear's paws, and for this we're going to be doing what's called a back stitch, which is a nice simple stitch to do in a small space. So we've put on approximately 2 meters of our black yarn now. We're going to bring our needle up from our starting point and making sure to leave a small tail underneath to tie off to. We're then going to go down approximately 1/4 of a centimeter and bring your needle down and pull through all of that yarn. And then leaving approximately the same amount of space, we're going to bring our needle up again. And then we're going to take our needle back down to the stitch that we just completed. So you'll see here, I'm just going to put my needle down into the stitch that I just completed before. And then I'm just going to repeat this process all the way around the outer edge of the paw. So again, leaving a space of about 1/4 of a centimeter. And then bringing our needle back down into the previous stitch. Now once we've completed that, we've got enough yarn on our needle now to do what's called a satin stitch, which is going to fill in the inner section of the paw. So bring your needle up from the top section of that pad, and then we're just going to do a straight stitch into the bottom section. Now this stitch can be quite challenging, and this is a way to do it to make it a little bit more simpler. We're going to leave a gap and bring our needle up and bring it down again into a straight stitch. So it's going to be a little bit gappy, but that's okay. We're going to fill that in shortly. And then once we've pulled that one through, we're then going to complete this half. So we're going to bring our needle up again next to it and then pull it through again in a nice straight stitch. And then there's a small section to the right of that still needs to be filled. So we're just going to do that again. And then bring your needle back down again into a nice straight stitch. And just repeat this process on the other side. This does take a little bit of practice. It can be a little bit fiddly, but if you practice a satin stitch, you can master it quite easily, but it does take a little bit of time. And now that's nice and filled in, we're just going to flip our garment over, and underneath you'll see we've got 2 tails, one threaded, one's our starting tail. We're just going to triple knot those together. Now moving on to the 3 little sections at the top of the paw, we should have enough yarn left on our needle to complete this. We're just going to do the exact same process. Obviously this is a much smaller space, so we're going to keep our stitches nice and small. And we're just going to do a back stitch all the way around, and then inside it should only need about 1 or 2 satin stitches to fill the area. And once you complete your third section, we're just going to tie off together with a triple knot. We're going to repeat the same process, and this time on the other side. Next, we're going to look at the outer section of the bear's nose. Now for this stitch, we're just going to do a simple back stitch. We're also going to use the same stitch for the inside of the ears. So you can put on your needle whichever color you want. I did originally decide to do it with a darker brown, stitched it, didn't like it, had to unpick it all. So you will see that there are a few dots here. Please excuse those. I decided that it needed to be light brown instead, as that looked much, much nicer. So again, leaving a small tail, we're just going to go in with a back stitch here. So we're just going to continue like this all the way around until we come to our starting point. So now that we're here, when we anchor it down and flip our garment over, you'll see that there's two very easy tails just to tie off to in a triple knot and just snip away any excess ends. Next, we're going to thread onto our needle approximately 2 meters of the black yarn. And here we're going to do the same back stitch all the way around the outer edge of the bear's nose. And then you'll find you've got enough yarn left on your needle to fill in the nose with a satin stitch. Now you should have enough yarn on your needle to finish this nose, so we're just going to bring our needle up from the bottom section of this part and tuck it into the bottom section of the nose. And then from here, we're just going to do a very, very short back stitch and just follow these fabric markings. Well, let's start with the left side first. Now our needle is a little bit too far away from where we need it to be, so we're just going to do a whip stitch all the way through our work. There's probably only need about 2 times to get it over to that side. And then once you're on that side, it makes it a lot easier to then continue your back stitch to finish the right hand side. And once we finish the bear's nose, we can just flip our garment over. We've got 2 tails there to tie off to. If you're a little bit far away from it, you can just thread through your work until they're a little bit more together, and it makes it a little bit easier to tie off to. Next, we're going to look at the bear's eyes, and this is the exact same process that we did for the nose and for the paws. So we're just going to thread on approximately 1/2 meter of the black yarn, and we're just going to fill in those eyes. We're going to start with a back stitch, fill in with a satin stitch, and then we can flip it over, triple knot, and snip off any excess ends. Adding the pupils in the eyes, you've got a small bit of white yarn in your kit. This is just for this section. It's a simple up and over. Make sure that you've got a bit of space in between your stitch so that you're not pulling it all the way through. You're just going to triple knot that together and snip away any excess ends. And just repeat the process on the other side, and then your sweet little bear has some eyes. Next, we're going to look at the inner section of the ears. Now, you can thread on some darker yarn for this. I did decide to do that. And you can do either a backstitch outline for this section, or you can do a backstitch outline and then fill it in with the satin stitch. It's entirely up to you if you like that fuller look. I've done a backstitch outline and then I did a satin stitch, which you'll see in a moment. So, but first we're going to just complete the outline with our backstitch. So you can flip the garment over, tie off these ends and just use the inner section as an outline. This is what I did to start with. So I did just the outline, snipped away my ends, and when I turned it over, I thought, oh, it looks cute, but I don't know, I thought it needed to fill those sections in. So I went ahead, threaded on my needle again, and I did a satin stitch and filled in this section too. So if you're confident with the satin stitch and you like that filled in look, then definitely do it. So next we're going to look at the initial, which will be on your stick and stitch. Now for this one, originally I thought baby pink would look really sweet. This is going to a girl. However, I stitched it and again I thought, I know it needs to be a bolder pink. So I unstitched it all and changed for a darker pink. So again, you will see my unstitched lines here, but we're just going to go in with a back stitch and follow our markings here all the way around. And you'll see that the back stitch is really good for lettering. It really defines all the letters really nicely. And once my letter is complete, I'm going to flip over and we're just going to tie off our ends with a triple knot. And that is our gorgeous little bear complete. Now it's entirely up to you if you want to add a few extras. I actually am going to add a few things to this bear, but I don't need the stick and stitch for that. I'm actually going to go ahead and put a sweet little bow in the bear's hair, and I'm going to add a few flowers around, but I don't need the stick and stitch for that. So let me show you how we remove that. So getting a lukewarm bowl of water, we're just going to submerge our sweater into the water. Now this can be quite tricky to remove, and if you are feeling okay about putting your garment in the washing machine, you totally can do that. Just pop it on a cold cycle and make sure it's on a delicate setting. If not, you can pop it in lukewarm water. You may need to just help it along a little bit, and sometimes it does need 1 or 2 goes at this to get the stick and stitch adhesive removed, or you can run it under cold or lukewarm water. And you're just going to flat lay to dry. Now once my gorgeous little bear is finished, I pop a bow in its hair, added a few flowers. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and happy stitching.